Ladies and gentlemen, throughout history, the greatest triumphs have emerged from the depths of adversity. What is it that allows some to rise above seemingly insurmountable obstacles while others succumb? The answer lies not in external circumstances, but in the unseen forces of the mind: assumption, belief, and unwavering faith. The greatest victories are won first in the mind. Every achievement, every breakthrough, and every transformation begins with a shift in perception. The individuals who defy the odds are not those who simply work harder or endure longer. They are the ones who fundamentally change how they see themselves. When a person assumes a new identity in their mind, they initiate an invisible yet powerful process that begins reshaping their external world. The mind, when properly directed, is not just an observer of reality, but the architect of it. Consider the story of a man who was born into poverty, surrounded by limitation and lack. His circumstances dictated that he would never rise beyond a certain level in life. The world saw him as another individual destined to struggle, and for a time, he saw himself the same way. However, something within him refused to accept this as his fate. He began to entertain a different possibility, not as a fleeting wish, but as an internal reality. He assumed the feeling of success long before it became visible. He mentally stepped into a life of abundance, not through hope, but through certainty. Before closing his eyes, he would vividly imagine himself living the life he desired. He walked through his future home in his imagination, felt the richness of financial freedom, and experienced the emotions of a man who had already made it. He was not waiting for the world to give him proof. He created the proof within himself first. He carried this new assumption with him daily, refusing to acknowledge any reality that did not align with the image he had constructed in his mind. Slowly but surely, his external world conformed. Opportunities that had never appeared before suddenly emerged. People who had once overlooked him now saw value in him. His circumstances reshaped themselves to reflect the identity he had assumed. The power of assumption is not limited to financial success. It applies in every area of life. Another example is a woman who, from childhood, was told she was incapable of achieving great things. She absorbed these words and lived according to them for years. However, something shifted when she realized that her limitations were not external, they were internal. She decided to change the way she saw herself. She no longer identified as someone who struggled or failed. Instead, she adopted the mindset of someone capable, powerful, and worthy of success. She imagined herself excelling, being respected, and achieving her goals. Nothing outside her changed. The same people doubted her, the same obstacles remained, and the same challenges persisted. But within, she was no longer the same person. And because she had changed, the world had no choice but to reflect her new belief. The job opportunities she once thought were impossible became accessible. The respect she once sought from others came effortlessly. She had rewritten her own script, not by forcing the outer world to change, but by assuming a different inner state. This principle operates whether one is aware of it or not. Every individual is constantly shaping their world based on the assumptions they hold about themselves. Those who remain trapped in difficult circumstances do not do so because the world is against them, but because they continue to assume that they belong where they are. The moment a person shifts their assumption, the process of transformation begins. True resilience is not just about surviving hardship. It is about refusing to let external conditions dictate one's identity. Those who have overcome the impossible have done so by first overcoming the limitations within their own mind. They do not beg for change, nor do they wait for external validation. They assume the reality they desire, live from that state, and persist in it until the world bends to their conviction. Hardship is often seen as an obstacle, something to be avoided or feared. However, adversity is not the enemy. It is the forge in which character is shaped, the pressure that reveals what a person truly believes about themselves. When faced with challenges, people respond in one of two ways. They either see themselves as victims of circumstance, powerless to change their reality, or they recognize adversity as an opportunity for transformation. Those who defy the odds do not do so because they are stronger or luckier than others. They do so because they choose to see obstacles as stepping stones rather than barriers. Consider an individual who faced constant rejection and failure. Each attempt to achieve their dream was met with resistance, and every effort seemed to end in disappointment. Most people in such a situation would give up, convinced that the world had determined their fate. But this person understood a fundamental truth. Reality is not fixed, and the external world is merely a reflection of inner conviction. Instead of accepting rejection as the final word, they decided to change their response to adversity. Rather than seeing failure as proof of impossibility, they viewed it as part of the process. Instead of being defeated by setbacks, they chose to assume the feeling of victory, even when circumstances suggested otherwise. They mentally stepped into the version of themselves that had already succeeded. They carried themselves with confidence, spoke as if their dream was inevitable, and refused to entertain thoughts of doubt. With each rejection, they reaffirmed their inner certainty rather than allowing fear to take hold. Something remarkable happened. The resistance that once seemed impenetrable began to dissolve. The same people who had dismissed them before suddenly took notice. The opportunities that had once seemed out of reach appeared as if by magic. But it was not magic. It was the natural consequence of a person who had shifted their internal state. They had transformed their identity, and in doing so, they transformed their reality. It is not an indication that one should stop pursuing a goal. It is a signal that a shift is required, not in the external world, but in one's perception of self. The most successful individuals do not avoid difficulties. They embrace them as necessary catalysts for growth. They understand that obstacles are not permanent, but one's reaction to them determines whether they persist. A person who sees adversity as an opportunity does not merely endure hardship, they use it to redefine themselves. They recognize that challenges serve to test their inner conviction. If they hold firm to their belief in their vision, circumstances must eventually conform. The world has no choice but to reflect the assumption they persist in. There are countless stories of people who have risen from impossible circumstances, not because their situation suddenly improved, but because they chose to change their response to difficulty. Those who succeed in the face of adversity do so because they refuse to accept defeat. They see themselves as victors even when everything around them suggests otherwise. The truth is that reality responds not to effort alone, but to assumption. If a person believes that failure is inevitable, their actions will unconsciously align with that belief, reinforcing their struggle. But if they assume success, if they persist in the belief that they are meant to rise above their circumstances, the world must eventually reflect that assumption. Resilience is not merely the ability to endure hardships, it is the ability to use them as fuel for transformation. Every challenge contains within it the potential for greatness, but only for those who choose to see beyond the temporary struggle. The question is not whether adversity will come, it always does. The question is how one will respond. Will hardship be the reason to give up, or will it be the force that propels one forward? The answer determines everything. Most people believe that success follows a linear path, that one must first struggle, then slowly progress, and only after years of effort finally achieve their goal. But those who defy the odds understand something different. They know that transformation does not happen in the future, it happens now. The key is not to work towards success, but to embody it before it arrives. The most powerful tool in shaping one's reality is the ability to assume the end result as already achieved, to mentally step into the future self before the world confirms it. There is a profound difference between hoping for a better life and living as if that life is already yours. When a person truly assumes the feeling of their desire fulfilled, they shift their entire state of being. Their thoughts, emotions, and actions begin to align with this new identity, and as a result, the outer world must eventually conform. This is not wishful thinking. It is the principle by which all great transformations occur. Imagine an athlete who has never won a championship. If they believe themselves to be an underdog, if they see themselves as someone who is always close to victory but never quite reaches it, that assumption will reflect in their performance. Their body will respond to the subconscious belief that they are not yet a champion. But if this same athlete shifts their self-concept and assumes that they are already the best, their movements, confidence, and decisions will reflect that new assumption. They will step onto the field not as someone who hopes to win, but as someone who has already won in their mind. The result? Their external reality begins to mirror this inner conviction. This principle is not limited to sports. A struggling artist, desperate for recognition, may spend years chasing success, constantly trying to prove their worth, but their very effort reinforces the idea that they are not yet successful. They are working towards something instead of living from it. The moment they shift their perspective, when they stop seeing themselves as a struggling artist and begin to feel, think, and act as a recognized master of their craft, everything changes. The work improves, their confidence grows, and the world responds accordingly. There is a story of a man who had lost everything: his business, his home, and his sense of direction. He had every reason to give up, but instead of succumbing to despair, he did something extraordinary. He decided to live from the end. Every day, he closed his eyes and imagined himself in his ideal situation, not as something he wished for, but as something that was already real. He walked through his future home in his mind, he felt the security of financial success, and he carried himself as someone who had already made it. Nothing changed externally. The same financial struggles remained, but internally he was a new man. He no longer reacted with fear, he responded with certainty. He no longer chased opportunities, he attracted them. Within months, doors began to open. He received offers and connections that had previously seemed impossible. His circumstances changed because he had changed within. This is the power of living the end result before it arrives. Most people wait for proof before they believe, but those who defy the odds believe first and the proof follows. They do not beg for opportunities, they expect them. They do not work toward success as if it is distant, they embody it now. The world does not shape them, they shape the world by holding firm to their assumption. Reality conforms to the state of mind one persists in. Those who mentally step into their desired future and refuse to waver in their assumption will see that future become their reality. The greatest secret of success is not effort alone. It is the ability to embody the end result so fully that the universe has no choice but to respond. The question is not whether you will achieve your dream. The question is whether you have the courage to assume it is already done. The world we experience is not separate from us. It is a reflection of our dominant thoughts, beliefs, and assumptions. Those who defy the odds understand that reality is not something fixed and unchangeable. It is something that bends to the conviction of the individual. The external world does not dictate what is possible. It simply mirrors back what a person believes to be true. The key to overcoming any limitation lies in mastering the mind, for it is within the mind that reality is first shaped. Most people live as though they are at the mercy of circumstances. They believe that if they were born into hardship, they are destined to struggle. If they have experienced repeated failure, they assume success is not meant for them. But those who reshape their reality do not accept what is. They declare what will be. They recognize that their life is the product of their most persistent assumptions, and they deliberately choose to assume something greater. A powerful example of this principle can be found in the story of a woman who had been diagnosed with a severe illness. Doctors told her that her condition was irreversible, that she would have to live with pain and limitation for the rest of her life. At first she accepted their words, and as a result her health continued to deteriorate. But something within her refused to believe that this was her fate. Instead of resigning herself to illness, she began to assume the reality of perfect health. She closed her eyes and felt what it would be like to be completely well. She saw herself strong, vibrant, and free. She did not merely wish for healing, she lived as if she were already healed. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had already won the battle. She refused to entertain any thought that contradicted her assumption of wellness. To the outside world, nothing had changed. The medical reports still showed the same diagnosis. But internally, she was no longer sick. She persisted in her new belief, holding on to the conviction that her body had no choice but to align with the assumption she had accepted as truth. Over time, something miraculous happened. Her condition began to improve. The symptoms that once controlled her life faded away. When doctors reevaluated her, they were stunned. What had been deemed irreversible had reversed. But she was not surprised. She knew that the external world had simply caught up with the reality she had already assumed within. This principle applies to every aspect of life. A person struggling financially does not overcome poverty by working endlessly in fear and desperation. If they assume they are poor, no matter how much effort they exert, their actions will unconsciously reinforce that assumption. They may earn money, but they will also find ways to lose it because they still identify as someone who struggles. But if they shift their inner identity, if they assume the feeling of financial security, if they see themselves as someone who naturally attracts opportunities and wealth, their world will begin to reflect that belief. They will move differently, make decisions from a place of confidence rather than lack, and doors that were once closed will open. The greatest secret to defying the odds is understanding that the outer world is not separate from the inner world. The mind is not merely an observer of reality, it is the creator of it. Those who change their lives do not do so by reacting to circumstances, but by assuming a new state of being and refusing to waver in that conviction. They do not wait for evidence before believing. They believe first, and the evidence follows. Anyone can change their life, but few are willing to change their assumptions. Those who do will find that reality is not something to be feared or fought against, it is something to be directed. The world will always reflect back what is most consistently believed, and for those who assume greatness, success, and transformation, the world will confirm that assumption every time. The stories of those who have defied the odds reveal a profound truth. Reality is not something external that controls us, but a reflection of what we assume to be true about ourselves. Those who rise above adversity do not do so by merely working harder or hoping for better circumstances. They do so by shifting their internal state, by assuming the identity of the person they wish to become before the world affirms it. Every great achievement, every remarkable transformation begins with an unwavering belief in a new reality. The external world is not rigid. It conforms to the thoughts, emotions, and convictions we persist in. Those who see themselves as victims of circumstance remain trapped. But those who declare their own success, who assume their victory as inevitable, are the ones who shape the world around them. Whether overcoming financial hardships, physical limitations, or personal struggles, the principle remains the same. Life mirrors what you hold to be true. The key is not to wait for external proof, but to persist in the belief of the reality you wish to experience. Those who master this understanding do not merely survive adversity, they use it as a stepping stone to something greater. The question is not whether challenges will come. They always do. The question is how you will respond. Will you accept life as it appears, or will you declare what must be? Those who defy the odds do not wait for permission to succeed. They step into success before the world acknowledges it, and in doing so, they prove that resilience is not just about endurance, it is about transformation.